happening, folks? Some movies scare you with what they show you, and some movies scare you with what they make you think. And some movies are just plain scary.
Men to woman, or woman to men.
More on that one really soon. Pascal Plant's late 2023 psychological thriller Red Rooms forces you to imagine everything, and it does it with an efficiency only an astute, detail-oriented director could deliver. Since its release, there's been no shortage of speculation around what's motivating the lead character's peculiar behavior. So today, we're going to take a fine-tooth comb to the movie, and I'm going to show you how I interpret this brilliant and complex character study. The director's very specific and intentional in what he chooses to reveal in this film, and the foundation of my interpretation begins with his decision to make the lead character's online username Lady of Shalott. As always, I'll explain myself as we go along. The movie opens in Montreal with a fashion model named Kellyanne, played by Juliette Gariepy. Yeah, I know, we had to learn French as kids in Toronto. Kellyanne is waking up outside a courtroom where the trial of Ludovic Chevalier begins today. She's bathed in unnaturally deep pre-dawn blue, and the saturated tone paints a very cold picture. We can't see her breath hanging in the air, and given Kellyanne's just slept outside overnight in an alleyway by herself as a single female, we can conclude the frigid tones to represent Kellyanne herself. And once she's inside the courthouse, all the colors of life return immediately. The man is accused of murdering 3 teenage girls and broadcasting it in a Red Room, which is a virtual gathering place on the dark web where people can pay to watch awful things happen. As often happens with these type of events, the case attracts both people who want to lay their hateful eyes directly on the alleged killer and the supporters of his potential innocence. Although the FBI provided the RCMP with evidence in the form of 2 snuff films, the on-camera killer wore a balaclava in both horrendous videos, bringing Chevalier's identity into question, and that's despite them finding the girls' bodies in Chevalier's own backyard. The opening interior scene is a flawless single take that lasts over 20 minutes. The camera floats through the clinical claustrophobic courtroom, timed perfectly to introduce us to the key players, namely the young victims, their family members, the jury, both legal teams, and the alleged killer himself, Ludovic Chevalier, who keeps his eyes forward and down at all times. By the 20-minute point, we know exactly what to expect from this unnerving case from both the prosecution and defense's perspectives. And as the defense lawyer's concluding his opening statement, the camera closes in on Kellyanne's face. She's been clocking Chevalier the entire time, and her eyes are burning a hole into the side of his head through the glass perspex. And at exactly 20 minutes and 14 seconds, writer-director Pascal Plant makes a promise to us in the audience. And the promise is a simple one. If you pay attention, he'll show you everything you need to see. And right now, everything you need to see is meticulously and deliberately false. I'll direct your attention to this reflection, which does not reflect reality. Plant's mirrored Kellyanne's face with this girl's face. We should see her, or him. This girl is sitting at an impossible Kubrickian angle. She shouldn't be anywhere near this reflection. And the closer we get to them, the further away her face should become. But if you're paying attention, you'll see the Doc's reinforced glass obscures and mirrors the 2 faces, presenting them to us as a curious pair. As we get tight in on Kellyanne, something in the defense team's closing statement, or something else entirely, brings a lone tear down her otherwise unmoving face. And if you consider we just watched over 20 minutes without a single cut, in filmmaking terms, both technically and artistically speaking, bringing this opening act to a close with an impeccably timed single tear is nothing short of remarkable. As she exits the court, Kellyanne is snapped out of her daze by the media, who asks her why she's there. She tells them she just wanted to see him in person, and that leaves us no further along in our assessment of why she's actually there. As the media does, they scurry off down the hall towards a commotion commotion like seagulls after a French fry in a McDonald's parking lot, and they recongregate around another young girl who's spouting juvenile conspiratorial snippets in support of Ludovic Chevalier's innocence. The young girl is manic and fanatical in her defense of the alleged monster, and her ravings hold Kellyanne's attention all the way down the stairs. If you recall the fake reflection inside the courtroom, allow me to introduce you to Clementine. Both girls have unique, striking appearances, and in real life, both actresses are redheads. And interestingly enough, in this movie, their hair's dyed the same near black color. And that's interesting because it speaks to an important element in their connection. As I see it, both girls have chosen to bring darkness onto themselves. But with nothing else to go on yet, we can only make assumptions based on what we do know. Her unhinged rant to the local news tells us Clementine obviously believes Chevalier is innocent. Therefore, the intentional reflection implies either they both think he's innocent, or we can interpret the mirroring to suggest they're literal opposites, meaning Kellyanne thinks he's guilty. Or maybe Kellyanne knows the truth. We can't tell yet, but you bet your bum we want to find out. And that's because this story is well written. Pascal Plante knows what he's doing. We learn Kellyanne lives alone, way up high in a sparsely decorated, luxurious high-rise apartment. And with minimal color on display, the lack of vibrancy and clutter in her living space matches the constant numb and faraway expression on her face. Her desktop wallpaper is a painting by an English Victorian artist named John Atkinson. The painting is called The Lady of Shalott. Now, by itself, that wouldn't have done much to perk my ears up, but as soon as we learn her online persona is also Lady of Shalott, that qualifies this as a clue from Pascal Plante. Kindly indulge me for a moment, folks. The Lady of Shalott is a 19th century ballad by Alfred Tennyson. It's about a cursed woman who is forced to see the world exclusively through the reflection in her mirror from high up in a tower. Now, Kellyanne lives near the top of a high-rise apartment. Wink, wink. More on this in just a moment. Kellyanne has a customized Alexa-style assistant programmed to help her with everything she does online, but viewed through the lens of Tennyson's poetry, I would also suggest she interacts with it to keep the loneliness at bay. But more on that point later, too. She confirms her next photo shoot with her agent and gets to earning money through high-stakes online poker. She has a real way with numbers and computers and interacts with them far better than she does with actual people. And once she's eaten and showered, she hops on the bus and heads back to her alley downtown, all without a hint of emotion. She's woken the next morning by Clementine, who has hitchhiked to Montreal for the trial. She's been sleeping in a local homeless shelter as she's got no money. In terms of mannerisms and outward behaviors, the girls are opposites. Kellyanne's guarded posture is apprehensive and cold, as per the returning blue hues, which we can interpret as her icy emotional state. Clementine's bubbly chihuahua-like disposition makes it hard to take her presence seriously. You'll notice while Kellyanne remains pure blue, Clementine's reflecting golden highlights. The light should be hitting both girls the same in such a close proximity, so this has to be intentional. In the next scene, as they're waiting for the train to arrive, Kellyanne's expression tells us she's tolerating Clementine, who reads the accused killer's daily horoscope in hopes of gleaming some insight into the day he's going to have. And his horoscope reads, "Happiness reigns inside you. Your beloved is trying to get closer." Always remember, folks, in a well-written movie, everything means something. When Clementine says Chevalier's birthday is coming up, Kellyanne points out it's exactly 3 weeks away on October 3rd. And now we know they both know a lot about this accused killer. In court, the next day, the mother of the third and last victim is asked to describe her daughter's outfit on the day she disappeared. You'll remember the RCMP possessed 2 snuff videos of victims 1 and 2, but there's been no video of the third victim recovered. As the mother's describing her daughter's school uniform and appearance, right down to her retainer, if you squint really hard, you'll see Kellyanne's eyes are wide and full of life, bouncing from the screen above with the school uniform to Chevalier's reactions. The scene finishes with his eyes locked on the images of the school uniform in front of him, and not in Kellyanne's direction. Afterwards, the girls grab a bite together, and Kellyanne gives Clementine $20, which seems odd for somebody so outwardly unemotional. And this is where Tennyson's poetry poetry comes into play. One of the most famous lines from the ballad might explain this duality within Kellyanne. In reference to her plight, having to view the world through a mirror from the confinement of her tower, she states, "I am half sick of shadows. Not fully sick, half sick." The Lady of Shalott half hates her confinement and limited view of the world, the shadows referencing the darkened reflections of her mirror. The other half of her recognizes it's her own doing. These mixed signals coming from Kellyanne express her own psychological confinement. She struggles with the loneliness and the isolation, but she also knows she's the cause of her own problem. Clementine rambles incessantly about irrelevant case details, oblivious to the fact Kellyanne keeps correcting her subtly every time she says something even mildly inaccurate. We've no idea how Kellyanne knows so much, and this is another demonstration of Pascal Plante's ability to maintain narrative tension. He only shows us snippets of what's going on in court, so it's entirely plausible Kellyanne's just paying attention every day, whereas Clementine seems to be running almost exclusively on the abundant fuel of excessive emotion. Outside the court the following day, the media is interviewing Francine Beaulieu, the mother of Camille Beaulieu. Kellyanne's trademark glare tells us she's absorbing every syllable the grieving mother is saying. And after she's done admonishing the accused killer's supporters, especially the ones bold enough to show up in court every day like Clementine, it's obvious something she said resonated with Kellyanne. Whatever it was, it sends Kellyanne into an online investigating frenzy. She uses her advanced IT skills to learn literally everything about Francine Beaulieu, from hacked passwords to the mother's desperate need to find out exactly what happened to her daughter, no matter how extreme it might be. When she's finished that, Kellyanne does her daily workout. The only thing we hear beyond the background music is the sound of her feet hitting the floor. And that reminds us how alone she is, literally and figuratively. The next morning, as Kellyanne's strolling through the city, Clementine the lapdog barks at her from 40 feet away, making it impossible for Kellyanne to pretend she didn't hear her. It's the first time they've seen each other outside of court, and Clementine's tripping over herself, complimenting Kellyanne's beauty. Pascal Plante faces them off against each other to further emphasize the stark contrast between them in real life outside the courtroom. He started off showing us they had something in common, and now he's showing us they're also very different. In her giggling giddiness, Clementine suggests Kellyanne's so pretty, if she was a bit younger with blonde hair and blue eyes, she'd be the serial killer's exact type. The pair part company, but after a moment's pondering, Kellyanne does something out of character again by inviting Clementine to stay with her until the trial's done. Back home, Clementine talks about Dungeons and Dragons and LARPing, while Kellyanne stays as silent as always. She only divulges the fact she earns a lot of her money playing online poker, as she's very good with numbers and computers. Clementine asks why she camps out every night in the alley instead of just getting a taxi every morning, and when Kellyanne avoids the question by cutting her off rudely and offering to order them pizza, we're deprived yet again of any insight to her motivations, beyond her obvious lack of interest in speaking about them. Clementine puts away half the pizza while Kellyanne pokes at a single slice, and when Clementine hears Kellyanne interacting with her Alexa device, she gets it to tell her a load of jokes. And while the AI is telling the jokes, Kellyanne's telltale gaze is fixated on Clementine, so she knows when she's supposed to laugh. But the pizza party's broken up when Clementine suggests these type of devices can spy on you. They switch to watching a live TV program about Chevalier. The panel believes his guilt is obvious. When they invite people to call in with their thoughts, Clementine gets in first and tears them all apart in support of his right to be presumed innocent until proven otherwise. You'll notice the golden highlights returning as she pleads her case. When she's done with the call, she breaks down, emotionally distraught. When Kellyanne puts her hand on her shoulder, everything turns cold and blue again, implying her hand's nothing more than an empty, feigned gesture of comfort. It's probably something Kellyanne learned by watching somebody else do it. The next morning, Clementine uses the $20 Kellyanne gave her to buy them some breakfast as a thank you. She apologized for crying the night before, and then she attempts to form a bond between them by asking directly, "Do you cry sometimes?" Kellyanne responds with, "When I'm feeling unstable, you know what helps me? Not sad, not upset, not hurt. Specifically, unstable, and this suggests she doesn't cry when she's distraught, and yet she closed the first act with a tear. She takes Clementine to racquetball, meaning when Kellyanne's feeling unstable, she physically exerts herself. This is a fairly common behavior among people who have difficulty processing emotions. And then back on the train, she explains her online poker. She thrives at it because the best players play without emotion. In her only expression of enthusiasm so far in this film, she tells Clementine she loves seeing the other players lose everything. There's a ghost of an actual grin on her face when she's saying it. They play the two snuff movies in court the next day, and everyone except the victims' families are told to leave the room. The order to leave angers Clementine because she believes the videos will exonerate Chevalier. Kellyanne doesn't seem bothered at all. While they're outside waiting, Kellyanne tries calming Clementine by revealing she's already seen both illegal videos, and they prove he's guilty. On Clementine's insistence, they watch the videos together. It's obvious Kellyanne's watched them several times as she points to every subtlety confirming Chevalier's guilt. Pascal Plante parts the curtains ever so slightly behind the girls to form a visible division, emphasizing the growing division between the girls yet again. And as the video plays, Clementine breaks down, as most people would, while Kellyanne does nothing but stare, unmoving, over the sounds of a preteen screaming and a high-pitched buzzsaw. The Lady of Shallott's view of the world is filtered through her mirror. As a contemporary Lady of Shalott, Kellyanne's mirror is the internet. She's been desensitized by her reliance on it. Her real-life sensations are numb from overexposure to the extremes of online life. And this causes her to continuously seek out progressively intense events and edgy interactions so she can feel something. That night, when it's time to bed down again, Clementine asks what we all want to know in why she is going to court every day. When she gets nothing back but a blank expression, Clementine goes home. That leaves Kellyanne alone, pondering Clementine's question, clearly unsettled by the possible answer. The next day in court, as they're talking about the dark web and the way the red rooms work, Kellyanne looks defeated as Chevalier is still looking dead ahead. And later that day, she visits the dead girl's school and then her house, where a memorial is set up in the yard. The following day in court, she's recognized by one of the prosecution, and then she's caught directly on camera coming out of the courtroom. Recognizing her actions as being dangerous to their business, her modeling agency cancels her upcoming shoots. Unstabilized by the day's events, she exercises and exercises, but nothing brings her stability back. And at home that night, she sits alone while her Alexa repeats joke after joke after joke, but she can't replicate Clementine's gleeful laughter. Once again, she's bathed in cold blue, and this leads her to a final act of desperation. In court the next day, on Chevalier's birthday, recalling Clementine's initial observations about her appearance, Kellyanne wears a blonde wig, throws in contact lenses and a retainer, and reveals she's wearing a school uniform just like Camille Beaulieu's, the youngest victim, whose family is sitting 15 feet away. And it works. She finally attracts his gaze. His first significant physical movement of the entire film is a casual wave. And also, for the first time in the film, Kellyanne smiles as she's dragged out, ecstatic, and restabilized by the intense interaction. At least for now. She tracks down the people who auction off the Red Room videos, and after a complex, involved process of proving her legitimacy, she's invited to enter an online auction for the video of Camille's final moments. It gets right down to the wire, but at the last minute, it appears she won't have enough money to win. So, out of desperation, the girl who dominates online poker with her lack of emotion goes all in on a very weak hand, and her emotional decision to bluff wins her the game and the money for the video. The unexpected win floods her with joy, or at least the sort of joy a person like Kellyanne can experience. But her elation quickly turns to paranoia. She considers Clementine's suggestion the Alexa devices spy on everybody. She transfers the money, and in a state of momentary fulfillment, she watches Camille's Red Room video, her face filled with bliss and morbid peace. Her eyes water, and that tells us the tear that closed the first act was born from the dark thrill of seeing Chevalier in person. That same night, dressed as Camille, again, she breaks into Camille's home where her mother is sleeping. As one final act of exhilaration, she poses for smiling selfies on the dead girl's bed before leaving a USB drive next to the sleeping mother. If this act confuses you, you are certainly not alone. And for a possible explanation, I've drawn upon the quote from earlier. Lady Charlotte is half sick of shadows. Half of Kellyanne seeks out the darkness, and that darkness brought her to the family home to perform this perverse act. The other half knows right from wrong. The other half gave Clementine $20 and invited the poor girl in off the street to stay at Kellyanne's apartment. She knows leaving this heinous piece of evidence behind will both bring peace to the grieving mother and send a killer off to jail. As Kellyanne leaves the story, a news broadcast tells us Camille's mother handed the USB drive over to the police. This third video contained indisputable evidence of Chevalier's guilt. Somebody also anonymously submitted Bitcoin records showing Chevalier's profit trail from the videos. In light of this new evidence, the movie's brought to an end with Chevalier pleading guilty. As much as I enjoy well-written ambiguity, especially with the ending of a movie, I know not everybody does. As a character study, I think Red Room stands miles above anything Hollywood's produced recently, and I'm really looking forward to whatever writer-director Pascal Plante has planned next. On the subject of ambiguity, I've had something stuck in my head since I last watched Red Rooms about a week ago. I can't figure out if Kellyanne was born the way she is, or if Plante's possibly presenting this as a cautionary tale. Like, maybe he's presenting this as the potential fate of all modern internet-dependent young folks. I suppose I'm not too worried about it, though. After all, I'm always complaining about how rarely modern movies actually get me thinking lately. And if I am stuck contemplating something long after the movie's ended, at least it'll be something simple to figure out, like nature versus nurture, right? Until next time, folks.